Hey everybody, if you're just joining us, we are giving folks a few minutes to get on board. There's a little bit of a delay between Zoom and Facebook Live. So we're just gonna give it a minute to get started. Thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited today about our Advent member talk. If you don't recognize me, my name is Charlotte. I am the Operations Director here at Advent Co-working. This is our weekly event series called Advent Member Talks. This is where we have members get to talk about their skills and their experience and share that with other members, but also the greater Charlotte community. Today we have a really amazing talk featuring Lucas Keipper of L&K Consulting. He is actually going to be talking about digital security for you and your business in 2020. There will be some time at the end for a short Q&A, so if you do have any questions for Lucas, please do put them in the comments section and we will get started with that at the end. Without further ado, I'm going to let Lucas take over and tell us all his valuable information he has about digital security.
Thanks, Charlotte. Appreciate Advent Co-working allowing me to do this talk. Let me just go ahead and get my screen share started here and we'll get started. Okay, so digital security for you and your business. Just to give you a quick overview of why you should be listening to me or what the point of all this is. I am an IT consultant for small business in the Charlotte metro area. My typical clients are between 5 and 50 employees, so that's the type of business that I'm protecting. As part of my job, I am a nerd speak translator. So I am one of those guys, they do exist, IT guys that are able to talk to people in regular English. So I handle all these things. I've set up the network at Advent. I handle networks, Windows, Mac, etc. But the end goal of what I do in business is to try and help my clients sleep soundly at night. Today we're talking about security, but that could cover all kinds of different things. We are in the same boat because if they're not sleeping soundly at night, I'm not either. So as far as security goes, why should we talk about security at all? People are probably pretty sick of hearing about it. There's all kinds of headlines that you see every day. Because of that, this is kind of an incomplete list of things, but it's like some of the really big ticket items that you want to hit that you can make a difference today about doing it. I find that if I do really detailed, in-depth stuff, people just check out partway through. So part of the reason we're even bothering with this is because cybercrime is basically getting out of control. Especially now that COVID has people working from home, that's given people, criminals, new targets. But before that even was basically more profitable than the illegal drug trade for a lot of entities. If you could think about it, I mean, basically you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to transport anything over borders. So it's very profitable. The margins are great. One of the other big reasons, phishing, if you've ever heard about it, it's just something we'll go into a little bit more later, but basically it's a way of tricking people with emails. And basically 1/3 of all of them are opened by users. So that's partly due to user education, very sophisticated attacks, but basically that means 100% of phishing emails are malicious and 1/3 of them get opened. So there's a huge group of people and services and devices that could be affected by this. And then if you're a business, information loss is a huge part of any of these attacks. So if you think about, even if you're like a solopreneur or what have you, every little thing or document you spent an afternoon on that you finally got figured out and taken care of and done, if you lose that, that could shut your business down. So there's more to it than just, oh, my email got hacked. You could seriously have your business affected or shut down. And then a big thing recently is ransomware. If you haven't heard of it, it's basically a way for a virus to encrypt your whole hard drive and make sure that you can't get your stuff. It used to be, these were just kind of sporadic and more consumer-based, like one-off things. But unfortunately, they're getting to be more targeted to business, and the ransoms are getting crazy high. So, for example, a local Charlotte business that I know of was ransomed for $100,000. They were not a 5-employee company, but as you can imagine, in some cases, in fact, in a lot of cases, businesses choose to pay that ransom because they aren't protected properly. They don't have good backups, et cetera. So there's some real danger here. It's not just fear mongering. So I promise I'll try to keep it short. So let's go on to the first thing on the list, passwords. Everyone's sick of hearing about them. They've been lectured about them to the end of days. So I'm going to start this in reverse because the first thing that I talk about will solve almost all of the pain points that most people have with passwords today. And that is a password database. If you haven't heard of it, it basically is literally just a big collection of all your passwords for everything you use that is protected by one master password. And what that gives you is the ability to have a unique password for every service that you use, which is just impossible if you don't have some way of storing that securely. Using a spreadsheet is not acceptable. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop you there on that. I know that a lot of people are guilty of it. I see it with my clients all the time. I'm still getting people off spreadsheets. So just go ahead and be ready to change that. So when it comes to passwords, yes, you need to have a long password. It needs to be complex. Some of the common things that people think they're being clever with are they're using just some obscure dictionary word. It doesn't matter. Every word in most languages is on some hacker's list to auto try on you if they're targeting you. Also, the whole hacker speak, using a 4 instead of an A, or using the @ sign instead of the letter lowercase a, that's already been taken care of too. So that's going to be on the list. You're not fooling anybody with that. A great tool before you even start filling in your big database of passwords is haveibeenpwned.com. It basically, it lists, if you give it your email address, it will list every service that your email address is associated with that has been breached in the past that is known. So if you're thinking, well, I use secure services, whatever. No, basically most services eventually or at some point in time will be breached, and you have to just plan for that. Big ones like Dropbox and other really recognizable names, they've been hit, and usually they don't realize it until 6 months afterwards. So that means you have a password that could be out there on the dark web being tried on all your accounts associated with that email address for 6 months before you even know about it. So if you check how they've been pwned, that will give you a good starting point. Basically, in that case, you need to change that password today, like in the next hour, I would do it. So moving on, multi-factor, if you haven't heard of it, most people have. It's when you're forced to get a text or use a code from your phone or whatever, some sort of, not just the password, something additional, usually associated with with your phone. And what that does is, even if your password has been breached, somebody has to basically use the code from your phone in addition to the password, which basically means it's very nearly impossible for them to get into your account. And then finally, I want to just cover, as far as it comes to the old adage of like never write your password down, that isn't always true. I would say never put it on a Post-it note and just post it somewhere. But if you treat it like cash, then it's still safe to write it down. And in fact, I would recommend that if you have a password database, you have a written down backup of that password so that you don't lose your whole database. So if you treat it like cash, that means don't leave it sitting around on the table. Put it in a safe or put it in your wallet, somewhere that you would consider secure. All right, so that's passwords. Antivirus and updates. There's not a lot of new stuff here that people probably aren't aware of, but I'll just cover it really quickly. If you have Windows or a Mac computer, you should have antivirus. Gone are the days where it was safe to just have a Mac and not have virus protection. I use Bitdefender with my clients, but there's several other high-level antiviruses out there that are just as good. This just get something. And then updates, if you have a technological device, update it. Basically, that protects you from a lot of stuff. That's like a whole separate protection layer that you're giving yourself, because the older something is, the more likely there's been an exploit or a way to get around it where someone can get into your device without even having to have a password. And then for phones, I don't necessarily recommend antivirus usually, but I would advise against doing what's called side loading. If you're on an iPhone, you can't do it, so you're already protected. If you're on Android, it means installing an app that is not in the Play Store. So if you have to go through all these hoops and it warns you a lot, usually you probably don't want to do that. But usually if you're on an app store that's approved, then you're pretty safe as far as that goes. Okay, moving along, backup. Backup is something that a lot of people think that they have, but they may not. So what I mean when I say that is that if you have something stored in one location, it's not backed up. So a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, I bought a backup drive, I put all my stuff on it, now it's backed up. Well, no, it's just sitting there in one place. So you need to have something stored in 2 different locations. And there's a lot of different options for what that secondary location could be. I use, for consumers, you could use Backblaze. It's basically unlimited, it's cheap. I think it's under $10 a month. Carbonite does a similar thing, and what that does, they both just back up to the cloud. So even if your laptop gets destroyed, you're gonna have that stored somewhere else. I would still be a little bit skeptical, like if you're using, say, Google Drive or Dropbox, that's still a single location. Dropbox is usually pretty good about, even if something gets deleted, they'll restore it within a certain period of time. But if you're on a free account, I wouldn't expect that to be the case. And if you're on a business account, there's still a certain number of days, I think 90 days. So get it somewhere else, especially if it's like something you don't mess with. You could just archive it, just copy it over. And the big reason, security-wise, you want to focus on that backup is if you get hit with ransomware, that is your ticket to get out of the ransom. Because if the ransom is dependent on you just not having any way to restore your data. But if you have a backup, you're clear. You got to reset all your passwords if you've been breached and all that stuff, but you cannot have to pay some exorbitant ransom for your hard work. All right, we're moving along. Pretty good clip. Phishing. If you haven't heard of it, it's aptly named. It's just with a PH. It's basically someone trying to throw a hook out in an email and trick you into doing something. Usually, people tend to think of this as like, oh, it's a link. As long as I don't click on this link, I'm safe. And that is certainly true in a lot of cases. That's a way for viruses to get installed. But the increasingly sophisticated attacks that we're seeing these days are people that are tricking you by looking like someone you either know or have a tangential business connection with. And they will do things like, say, send you an invoice with an attachment that then prompts you to log in somewhere to download the attachment. And then what that does is it steals your username and password, and you're done at that point. So there's a lot of tricky ways that they can do this. I almost would say you're doomed at some point to potentially be tricked, because they're getting increasingly sophisticated. They prey on kind of your curiosity, your fear, or your hate. What's something that's going to trigger you into clicking on that link or wanting to know what something is really fast? One example is I've seen a lot of recently is compensation declined. So somebody thinks, oh, this job I'm applying to, like, they just told me they're not going to pay me as much as I wanted, and you like immediately want to find out why. That's the kind of thing that you have to be aware of and just kind of slow yourself down on. So be aware, phishing can come from a legitimate address. If that address was hacked, then it could just be that person, even with their exact correct signature, sending you a quick request. And if that looks suspicious or fishy or what have you, I recommend that you contact them some way outside of email, and you don't use any information from the email they sent you as to how to contact them. So for example, go to their website, look up that person's email, or call their main number, or if their whatever number is listed there. Just that kind of common sense thing, because anything that they say in that email, it might not be that person. Another big protection, going back to this password database recommendation that I made earlier, is if you click on a link in a phishing email and you're using the auto login from your password database, it's not going to auto fill your username and password on the bogus site. So that gives you an extra level of like, wait, whoa, this is not the thing that I thought it was, because my password manager doesn't even recognize it to enter in my username. All right, moving along. So now that we've kind of covered those subjects, the biggest hurdle, I think, for most people is, how do I get started? Because 6 months from now, you're going to be asking yourself the same thing if you don't do something today. So that would be my recommendation. Start something today, whether it be signing up for that password database service. The LastPass that I recommended is free for like the initial account. Get a feel for it, and then just put it away for the day, and just know that in the future, every time that you sign up for a new service, or every time you log into a new account that you haven't logged into in a while, you're going to put it in that database. And that means 6 months from now, even if you're not fully covered, you're like well along that pathway to being much more protected. I would also just identify some of your like really key accounts. So, you know, the obvious stuff like your bank account, any email address you have, because if your email gets hacked, then that means they can send password resets to a lot of your services that provide that service, and then get into various other things. Laterally is what they call it. So get on this rail of security, get in that mindset where you're just going to add one thing at a time here and there. Take an extra, say, minute when you're creating these new accounts. Be like, look, it's a little bit of a hassle, but I can promise you this: nobody goes back and after they've set something up and re-changes it for all their accounts. It just doesn't happen. I don't do it because there's just not enough time in the day. So if you build that into the initial setup, you're going to be in a lot better place. So the reason I have a bunch of fruit hanging over here on the side is this is your goal. Don't be the low-hanging fruit. And what I mean by that is there are a ton of people that are working and living insecurely, and they're the low-hanging fruit for hackers or people that are scammers or phishing or whatever. So if you can just raise yourself a little bit above that, you're much less of a target. And that is just going to make you overall more secure. All right. I am a little ahead of time, but I don't think that's a problem. So I'm ready to take any questions anybody has had over this talk. And I'll wait on Charlotte if we've gotten any of those.
Thank you, Lucas. That has been super helpful. And thank you for including all the links that you referenced in your talk right here, because that was actually one of the questions, with some recommendations for password managers, and you got it right there. So that is perfect. Just wanted to ask some other questions that we have received. So somebody is wondering, if you've had an email account for a long time and you cannot remember how many accounts it's a link to, is there an easy way to find that information?
That is a good question. I would say if you have something like Gmail and you're not deleting all your email, then you could do a search. that's going to have to be a little more specific with keywords. If you're concerned that it's just been breached, then you could use haveibeenpwned.com. That will at least list any services it's connected to that have been breached. Otherwise, that is a very good question. I might want to look that up because there's just really not any real connection other than, say, an email that you got from them on your account creation. So, yeah.
So maybe an alternate question might be, is it wise to change your email frequently? I guess depending on what you use it for.
I wouldn't say change your email address frequently. If you're wanting to make a clean break and stop kind of the built up years of spam, you could, but there's a lot of work involved in there, and that's really not a clean solution usually. But if you can do that, that's great, but it's just you'll have to start from fresh and tell everybody what your email address is, which is a huge hassle. So I would say, yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. And another question somebody asked was, do you have any strategies for talking to family members? They mentioned older family members who might believe every link that they get in an email, or kids who might not understand long-term consequences of things they do on the internet. Do you have any strategies for those conversations?
Sure. That's a really good question. I would say just to be overly suspicious, just tell them to be overly suspicious of everything, which I know is super hard to convey, especially when people are like, they get those curiosity type things and they really just want to click on something. I would say just, you can't trust anything over email, and especially be on the lookout for those things that are like, in your personal life, you're almost never going to need a wire transfer to or from anybody. So just never assume that if that's even mentioned, that that's not legit. But another thing that people kind of get a little tricked on here and there is this kind of moving around of like, oh, if you get this gift card from here and then send it there, then the scammer somehow, uses that to trade in for real money. So be on the lookout for stuff like that. Any kind of trading around of stuff, or, no one's ever going to ask you for a password over email. Don't click on any link sent to you in an email. If, say, your bank is emailing you and it is a legitimate bank email, just go in and type in the address directly in your browser. Don't click on that link, because that way you're just never going to get tricked and you don't have to think about it as much.
That's really good advice. Someone asked, if you need to send sensitive info to someone quickly, perhaps it's for a colleague in your business, and you don't want to send it by email, what's the best way to do it? Is there a secure alternative?
That's a good question. I would have said up until just recently, Firefox had a send service that they just shut down. But I'm trying to remember this other address. I'll have to look it up, but I can post it afterwards. But it's basically the same thing. You basically just can upload a file, transfer the link, and then it expires after a certain amount of time. There are like business solutions for that, but this one is free. But yeah, a lot of your if you have like a business grade file sharing solution, that's a lot of them, they're similar to Dropbox, but they have a lot of like business protections added on. They will usually have something like that where you can send an expiring link, and that's great because anytime it's a really good instinct to not send secure information over email, because email just lives forever. So something that you sent three years ago is still sitting somewhere. If it's not in your inbox, it's in the person who it got sent to or sent from in their outbox. So that's a really good instinct. Don't trust email as a secure channel for anything. I would say if you're really just pinched for time, even just sending a text is more secure. It's not perfect. And then there's stuff like the Signal app. It encrypts all messages, and it's kind of like a text messaging app, but it also will do a secure phone call or a secure video chat. And that basically just ensures that end-to-end it's encrypted. So you can send stuff that's like an image or a text if it's something really quick using that Signal app. That works great. That's what I actually use instead of my regular text messaging app, because it'll also send text messages insecurely if you wanted to do both.
Gotcha. I think some people in the chat were mentioning, was WeTransfer something that you were thinking about in that question?
That's one that works. Yeah, definitely. Just make sure it expires. That's all. And you can rig up your own. So like Dropbox and Google Drive both have an option to share a link, and you can just upload the file there and then share the link instead of sending an attachment. And then that way you can turn that link off whenever you want to manually, but you just have to remember to. That's why I like the ones that expire automatically.
Gotcha. We have another one that's kind of funny. Somebody wants to know, what is the worst password you've ever seen? So I guess the lowest hanging fruit you've ever encountered.
I mean, it's password, all lowercase.
Oh.
That's easy. I've seen a 1, 2, 3, 4, but most things like don't even let you do one that short anymore.
That's amazing. Do you have any particular stories from when you first encountered a business, when you first started working with them, and seeing how far they've come in upping their digital security? Who's had the best journey?
Oh, that's a good question. Most of my clients I've had for several years now. So, I mean, yeah, without naming the business type, definitely had a client when I first signed on with them that literally had Post-its of like financial accounts on a screen that customers were walking past. So I'd say that's like definitely one of the worst examples of just like that was so immediately exploitable by, you know, so many people that were seeing it. But really it's a gradual procedure. For instance, with all of my clients now, because of this increased amount of, you know, targeted ransomware takeovers, where it's like it's ransomware, but it's actually run by a human, and they take over the whole network and then lock everything down. That has made me have to reevaluate. And just to my right, actually, I've got a whole whiteboard full of like services and things we need to change, and just like push that out to all my clients. So it's ever evolving for sure. So it never stops.
Amazing. So thank you so much for your time, Lucas. Lastly, if folks want to get in touch with you, if they want to learn more about your business, or perhaps they have questions that we didn't get to during this talk, how can they get in touch with you?
The last address there on the resources, just lmkconsulting.net. That will do it. That's Lima Mike Kilo Consulting.net. There's a contact page there, or you can just do Lucas K at that domain, and that's my direct email address.
Beautiful. And actually, I just saw one more, so I lied. That was not the last question. Somebody wanted to know if you have a direct favorite between 1Password and LastPass. Sounds very controversial.
Very controversial. I would say, before I even answer that, it's not so much important which one you get, unless it's like some Ukrainian site that you've never heard of. Like, get a password manager, and you're doing miles better than anyone else. With that said, I personally have a lot of experience with LastPass, so I more or less like the way it works. There's some things about it that are kind of a little bit of a pain in the ass, but that's the geeky side of me getting annoyed with kind of the more esoteric settings. I know that there are several people at Advent that use 1Password, and they seem pretty happy with it. So I would say either one of those would be just great.
Thank you so much, Lucas. This has been amazing. If you want to check this out later, we are going to upload it to our YouTube channel. So you will be able to rewatch it, send it to your friends, people who you think might need this information. And again, thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Charlotte.